Feeding strays again, huh? The laughter cut through him before the words finished echoing. He didn't answer. He just held out the sandwich, half torn, to the thin boy waiting by the door. The child took it quickly, eyes wide with hunger. Behind him, a crowd of coworkers whispered like a wave. "Man's got a savior complex," someone said. "Or maybe he wants attention," another added. He kept his head down. The boy mumbled a quiet thank you and ran off. For a second, silence tried to settle, but a phone camera flashed. Someone caught the act, posting it with a smirk. The caption would read later, "Company janitor adopts the poor." He felt it before he saw it: mockery dressed as entertainment. A single kind gesture turned into gossip fuel. He turned to leave, sandwich crumbs still on his palm, but a voice from behind made him stop. "Do you ever eat, or is this your new hobby?" He didn't recognize the tone. Light, teasing, cruel. He wanted to answer, to say something that would end it, but his throat locked. He picked up his cleaning cart instead, pushing it past the laughter, pretending it didn't burn. At a table nearby, someone had gone still. The CEO. No one noticed him watching. He didn't laugh, didn't speak, just watched the janitor's quiet retreat, each step deliberate, patient, heavy. A supervisor leaned over to the CEO. "He's been doing that a lot lately. Gives away his lunch, makes the staff uncomfortable." The CEO said nothing. His eyes followed the man out the door. The mockery kept rolling behind him, but he didn't hear it anymore. He walked back to the hallway, back to silence, back to the one thing he knew how to control: his work. He thought the moment had passed, but someone had seen him differently. "Eat slowly, sweetheart. You'll get stomach cramps again." He smiled as he said it, even though his own stomach had been empty since sunrise. His daughter, barely 9, nodded with a mouthful of rice and beans. She didn't notice that her father's plate was missing from the table again. Every morning started the same way: alarm before dawn, quick prayer, uniform pressed by hand, and a kiss on her forehead before walking her to school. Then came the bus ride to the city. One man, one lunchbox, one mop handle sticking out of his bag. He worked at the same building for 6 years. No title changes, no promotions. Just quiet reliability. Floors shined because of him. Trash bins emptied themselves before complaints reached management. The others barely noticed. To them he was part of the background noise of efficiency. He'd learned to move invisibly. That's how the world treated those who cleaned up after it. But he didn't mind. What hurt wasn't being unseen, it was being reminded of why he stayed. His wife's name was Maria. She used to laugh at how seriously he took small things. The corners of bed sheets, the alignment of spoons. "You'd make a great hospital janitor," she once teased, long before she ever needed one. When the illness came, it came fast. Medical bills stacked higher than hope. He took double shifts, sold the car, skipped meals, and still couldn't keep up. The day the doctor said too late, something inside him folded and never reopened. Since then, every act of kindness felt like an apology he could never say to her face. Feeding the homeless boy wasn't charity. It was survival of his soul, a small rebellion against the kind of world that had ignored her suffering. At work he kept his distance from gossip. Co-workers joked about their vacations and cars. He nodded politely, pretending to understand. The only picture on his locker door was of his daughter missing teeth, sin-lit grin, eyes that forgave too easily. Each payday, he divided his envelope the same way: rent, school fees, and her lunch account. What was left bought soap and bus fare. He told her he always ate at work. It wasn't a lie, it was a rearrangement of truth. Sometimes he'd sneak into the break room just to smell food, others left behind. It wasn't hunger that hurt most, it was the memory of meals once shared. He'd stand there a minute longer than necessary, then get back to mopping as if nothing stirred inside him. That day in the cafeteria, when he gave away his lunch, wasn't unusual. The homeless boy had started showing up near the building dumpster. The janitor saw too much of his past in those eyes. Same quiet acceptance, same look that said, "I don't expect help, but I'll take it if it comes." He didn't expect anyone to notice. Certainly not the CEO. To him, the higher floors were another world, one built on glass and meetings, where decisions were made about people like him without knowing their names. He believed in small circles of goodness. One person to another, quietly, unseen. That was enough. But after the laughter that day, something shifted. The whispers followed him even into the cleaning closet. Saint of leftovers. Lunchroom savior. Each word carried mockery, but he told himself to let it pass. That night at home, His daughter asked why he wasn't eating again. He smiled, told her he'd already had something at work. She tilted her head, suspicious but kind. "You always say that, Daddy." He ruffled her hair. "Because it's true, Bug. I'm full when you are." She laughed, but her eyes studied him longer than usual. She was too young to understand sacrifice, yet too smart not to sense it. After she went to bed, he opened his wallet. Inside, folded beneath an old photo of Maria, was a hospital bill he could never throw away. He didn't know why he kept it. Maybe as punishment, maybe as promise. Outside, rain hit the window. He sat in silence, holding that worn paper, whispering into the dark. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I can save someone." He didn't know that the same day, in a boardroom far above his pay grade, a man who hadn't known loss in years had replayed the scene in the cafeteria. The quiet act that pierced through comfort like glass. The janitor thought the world had forgotten him. The world, it seemed, had just begun to notice. "Sit down, Daniel." The tone was sharp, managerial, stripped of warmth. Daniel obeyed. 3 people sat across from him, his supervisor, the HR officer, and a department head he'd never met before. A stack of printed papers lay on the table between them. "Do you know why you're here?" the HR officer asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am." She slid one of the papers toward him. It was a still image from the video, his hand outstretched, the homeless boy taking the lunchbox. The caption beneath it read, "Kindness doesn't ask for an audience." Daniel blinked slowly. "I didn't post this." "We know," she replied. "But the content originated on our property. It's been circulating across departments. That makes it a corporate matter." The department head leaned forward. "You realize this creates liability issues, right? If that boy had gotten sick or claimed harm, we could have been sued. We can't have unauthorized individuals on company premises." Daniel tried to explain. He wasn't inside, he was by the back door. "He's just a hungry kid. Intentions aren't the issue," the supervisor cut in. "Perception is. You've created unwanted PR exposure. It looks like we exploit poverty, or allow trespassing. Legal's already seen it." He looked between their faces, searching for one shred of empathy. "I didn't mean for anyone to see. I just gave him food." The HR officer sighed. "We're not questioning your character, Daniel. But you have to understand, companies have rules for a reason. This isn't a charity, it's a workplace." The words landed like stones. "This isn't a charity." He wanted to ask, "Then what are we, if not human?" But he stayed quiet. Years of swallowing unfairness had taught him silence kept paychecks coming. They handed him a warning letter. "One more violation, and we'll have to reconsider your employment." He took it with trembling hands. "Understood." As he left the room, a few employees nearby looked up, pretending not to stare. Whispers followed him again, softer now but sharper. By lunchtime everyone knew. The man who gave food to a hungry child had been reprimanded for it. In the cafeteria, laughter returned in new forms. "Guess charity work's off the clock now. Maybe next time he'll get the kid to sign a waiver." He walked past them without a word. The same floor he polished now reflected their cruelty. That evening when he picked up his daughter from school, she seemed unusually quiet. "Daddy," she said after a long pause, "someone in class said you're in trouble at work." His chest tightened. "Who told you that?" "Emma's mom works in the same building. She said people are talking about you online." He stopped walking. The playground laughter around them faded. "What did they say?" "That you helped a poor boy and your boss got mad." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Is that true?" He looked at her small, worried face. For a moment he wanted to lie, tell her it was all fine, that adults just talked too much. But she had his wife's eyes, calm, sharp, unforgiving to dishonesty. "Yes," he admitted softly, "it's true." She frowned. "But you didn't do anything wrong." He knelt to her level. Sometimes doing what's right makes people uncomfortable, especially when they've forgotten how to care. She didn't fully understand, but she hugged him anyway. That small hug held all the comfort the world had failed to give him. At home he sat staring at the warning letter on the table. The company logo printed above his name looked heavier than ever. He thought about tearing it up, but he couldn't risk it. Rent was due in a week, his daughter's school fees next month. He couldn't afford He whispered to himself, "Just one more week. Keep your head down. Do the job. Don't draw attention." But even as he said it, something cracked quietly inside him. He'd spent his whole life believing kindness was its own reward. Now it felt like a liability, a line item in someone else's risk report. That night, he couldn't sleep. He replayed every word from that meeting. Liability, exposure, rules, words that stripped away meaning, leaving only procedure. Somewhere above him, in a high-rise apartment, the CEO sat in silence too, staring at the same printed still of Daniel's act. But where the manager saw liability, he saw truth, the kind of truth that exposed the emptiness in their policies. For Daniel, though, there was no comfort in being misunderstood by the powerful, only the exhaustion of being punished for humanity. He lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, wondering if compassion had become a crime, and if he had the strength to keep committing it. "You're quiet lately, Daddy." Daniel didn't answer right away. He was washing the same cup for the third time, pretending it needed more soap. The running water covered the sound of his sigh. "Just tired, sweetheart. Long days." She didn't believe him. She'd seen the way he came home now, shoulders heavier, eyes lost somewhere between exhaustion and disbelief. Even his smile felt rehearsed, like a mask he put on just so she wouldn't worry. At work, silence had become his only defense. He avoided the cafeteria, skipped break times, and stayed in maintenance closets longer than he needed to. The laughter he once ignored now echoed sharper in the halls. Whenever he walked in, conversations cut off mid-sentence. He didn't have to hear the words anymore. He could feel them. The boys stopped coming. For days, Daniel looked toward the back door out of habit, half expecting to see that small, familiar silhouette. Nothing. Maybe the child found another spot to hide from hunger. Or maybe he'd learned, just like Daniel had, that kindness carried a cost. He tried to push the thought away, but it stuck like dust that wouldn't sweep off. Each night he came home later, quieter. His daughter noticed. She drew less, talked less, and waited longer for him at the table. One evening she pushed her plate toward him. "You eat first, Daddy." He smiled faintly. "No, Bug. That's yours. But you look hungry." He looked away. "I'm fine." The small exchange said everything words couldn't. Children knew when something sacred in their home was breaking. That night, after she fell asleep, Daniel sat by the window. Streetlights shimmered on the pavement like distant stars. He opened his wallet and looked at Maria's picture again. "You'd tell to keep going," he whispered. "But what if keeping good gets you punished now?" He rubbed his temples and let the silence swallow him. Across town, the CEO was awake too. His penthouse overlooked the city, yet all he could see was that 1-minute video replaying in his mind. Daniel's quiet act had pierced something deeper than guilt. It had cracked the comfortable distance between leadership and reality. He thought of the last board meeting, where executives had mocked the janitor. He'd said nothing then, and that silence now felt cowardly. The company preached compassion, yet punished it when it wasn't monetized. He opened his laptop and typed Daniel's name into the employee directory. The file showed 6 years of perfect attendance, commendations for cleanliness, and no complaints. He scrolled through performance notes. Reliable, punctual, quiet. Not a single line about character, or kindness, or heart. He closed the laptop. The word quiet lingered. Why did that bother him? Because he envied it, maybe. The simplicity of doing good without needing credit. The next morning, Daniel showed up early, as always. The building still slept, and that was how he liked it. He polished floors that would soon be walked over, emptied bins that would soon be filled again. Work that erased itself by design. Around midday, the supervisor walked by and handed him a new assignment list. "No cafeteria duty for you this week," she said quickly, not meeting his eyes. "Just focus on lower floors." He nodded. He understood what it meant. They didn't want him visible. In the elevator, he caught his reflection. Tired, smaller somehow. He'd always believed dignity came from how you worked, not what you earned. But now he wasn't so sure. That afternoon, he passed by a digital notice board flashing the company's new campaign, Humanity in Action. Smiling faces, slogans about kindness, teamwork, inclusion. The words felt like mockery. He turned away and went back to mopping, telling himself it didn't matter. But deep down, something inside him was starting to fracture. A slow, quiet rebellion of the soul. Meanwhile, the CEO sat in his office, staring out the window as a drizzle began to fall. He'd just signed off on another marketing proposal about corporate empathy. The irony made him wince. He found himself thinking of Daniel again, wondering what kind of world punished a man for the one thing everyone pretended to value. He thought of his own father, a mechanic who used to hand out sandwiches to homeless workers near the factory gates. Back then it never felt like charity. It was decency, simple and wordless. Now everything felt branded, strategic, polished for applause. The CEO leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "We built a company that rewards appearance. he muttered. And I let it happen. Both men ended that day in silence, one drowning in hopelessness, the other in guilt. Daniel sat at the edge of his daughter's bed watching her sleep. Her tiny fingers clutched the stuffed bear his wife had sewn years ago. He brushed her hair aside and whispered, "Maybe one day, the world will understand." The CEO, miles away, whispered something too. "Maybe one day I will." Neither knew it yet, but their quiet reflections had set a collision course in motion, one that would test not just their positions but their humanity. Maintenance to the third floor. Water leak near executive offices. The call came through Daniel's worn-out radio just as he was locking up for the night. He almost ignored it. His shift was done, and someone else was supposed to cover upper floor requests, but pulled him back. He grabbed his mop bucket and trudged to the elevator. By the time he reached the corridor, the lights were dimmed, and the building was mostly empty. The silence felt expensive up here. Thick carpet, framed awards, untouched desks. A thin stream of water trickled from a burst pipe behind a decorative panel. Nothing serious, just messy. He knelt down, wrench in hand, and started tightening the joint. That's when he heard the footsteps. Slow, steady, deliberate. "Didn't expect to see you up here this late." Daniel turned. The CEO stood at the end of the hallway, jacket slung over one arm, phone in the other. His voice wasn't sharp like the others. It carried curiosity, soft, measured. "Pipe leak," Daniel said, quietly. "Didn't want it to flood overnight." The CEO nodded, stepping closer. "I appreciate that." He crouched down beside Daniel, surprising him. Executives didn't kneel on wet floors, but this one did, or maybe he wanted to see what humility looked like up close. For a few seconds they worked in silence, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound between them. Finally the CEO spoke. "I saw the video." Daniel froze. The wrench slipped from his hand. "I didn't film it," the CEO continued, "but I've watched it more times than I'd like to admit." Daniel's throat tightened. "Sir, I wasn't trying to cause trouble." I know," the CEO interrupted gently. "That's why I'm talking to you. You weren't performing. Everyone else was." He sat back on his heels, studying the janitor's face. "You did something most people only talk about, and somehow it became a problem." Daniel didn't look up. "That's how it goes, sir. The world likes kindness in theory, not in practice." The CEO exhaled slowly, as if those words hit closer than he expected. "You might be right." He leaned against the wall. "Do you regret it?" Daniel shook his head. "Regret being caught, maybe, not the act itself." The CEO smiled faintly. "Fair answer." A few minutes passed before Daniel stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Pipes fixed. I'll make sure maintenance checks the seal in the morning." He started packing his tools, but the CEO wasn't ready to let him leave yet. "Do you mind if I ask something personal?" Daniel hesitated. "Depends what it is."
Why'd you do it?
"You've been here 6 years. You must know this company doesn't exactly reward gestures." Daniel paused. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing. A stranger gave me food outside a hospital. Didn't ask my name. Didn't want thanks. I guess I've been trying to pay that moment forward ever since." The CEO nodded slowly. "You're trying to repay a debt that can't be repaid." "Maybe," Daniel said quietly, "but it helps me remember who I am." That line hung in the air like truth too simple to argue with. The CEO straightened his tie, unsure what to say next. For a man who led hundreds, he suddenly felt like a student in front of someone who'd mastered what no leadership course could teach. Grace without audience. Daniel pushed his cart toward the elevator. "You should go home, sir. It's late." The CEO half smiled. "So should you." Daniel nodded but didn't turn around. The elevator doors closed between them with a soft ding, leaving the CEO staring at his own reflection. That night he couldn't shake the conversation. It felt grounding. No polish, no titles, just truth. He opened his laptop, pulling up Daniel's profile again. There was a note about his emergency contact. A daughter named Sophia, age 9. A single parent. No other relatives listed. He scrolled further and saw the record of unpaid leave years ago. Hospital documents attached. He clicked, and for a moment the sterile summary told a quiet tragedy: spouse deceased. Medical debt cleared through wage deduction. The CEO leaned back in his chair, eyes stinging in a way he hadn't felt in years. He whispered to himself, all this time he was carrying that alone. Meanwhile Daniel walked home under flickering streetlights. He wasn't sure why the CEO had spoken to him, or what he wanted, but there was something different in that man's tone. Something that didn't sound like management. At home, Sophia was half asleep on the couch, a schoolbook still open on her lap. Daniel lifted her gently, tucking her into bed. As he turned off the light, she murmured, "Daddy, did work get better today?" He smiled faintly in the dark, maybe a little. It wasn't hope yet, but it was something close. The next morning, the CEO asked his assistant to discreetly compile Daniel's personnel record and background, not to discipline him, but to understand him. He said it was for internal morale research, but deep down he knew it was for something else. To remind himself that leadership meant seeing the invisible. In the quiet before the office filled with noise again, he looked out over the city and whispered, "Maybe decency still exists. I just haven't been looking in the right places." And for the first time in years he smiled, not for cameras, not for meetings, but because humility had found a way to knock on his door, wearing a janitor's uniform. "Morning, Mr. Cruz." Daniel turned, surprised. It was the receptionist, someone who'd never greeted him before. Her tone wasn't mocking, just respectful. He nodded back, unsure how to respond. As he pushed his cart Kirk's the lobby, he noticed something else. Fewer stares, fewer whispers. The same people who once smirked now stepped aside quietly, offering half smiles they didn't used to give. He didn't know it yet, but the shift had started from the top. The CEO had begun watching, not in judgment but in quiet study. Every few days he'd pass by maintenance logs, glancing for Daniel's name. The man worked extra hours without complaint, volunteered for late shifts, and once stayed all night to clean after a broken pipe burst. No requests for overtime pay, no fuss, just quiet reliability. One afternoon, the CEO observed from a distance as Daniel helped a new employee fix a jammed vending machine. The woman had been nearly in tears, coins stuck, lunch ruined. Daniel had smiled softly, used a screwdriver from his pocket, and freed the snack. Then he handed it to her and said, "You don't owe me, just pass it on." The CEO caught himself smiling too. Later that evening, he asked his assistant, "What do we know about his family?" "Single father, daughter named Sophia, public school nearby," she replied. "Grades are good, but looks like tuition might be overdue. There's a note from HR about deferred payment requests." The CEO leaned back. "Make sure the school gets covered anonymously. Say it's from a community scholarship fund." "Understood, sir." He didn't tell Daniel. He didn't want gratitude. He wanted fairness, something the man had long been denied. A week later, Daniel got a call from the school. "Mr. Cruz, just confirming your daughter's tuition is cleared through the new scholarship program. Congratulations." He stood silent for a moment, confused. "Scholarship? There must be a mistake." "No mistake," the voice assured. "Her record qualifies. It's all taken care of." He hung up, still stunned. For the first time in years, relief felt real. He sat down on a bench outside, eyes closed, whispering, "Thank you, whoever you are." That evening Sophia came home waving a letter. "Daddy, they said my school fees are paid. I can join the art program now." Her joy filled the small apartment. Daniel laughed, a sound that had been missing for months. At work his steps grew lighter. He started humming again while cleaning, a habit from before Maria's illness. He greeted coworkers, even cracked a joke once, surprising himself. People noticed. The man they'd mocked was quietly rebuilding their morale without trying. When the coffee machine broke one morning, he fixed it before anyone complained. When a temp worker cried after spilling paperwork, he helped her reorganize it, saying, "Mistakes don't mean you're bad, they mean you're learning." The CEO, walking by unnoticed, heard that line. It stayed with him all day. That week he initiated something new, a community hour for employees to volunteer or mentor others. Officially it came from the HR department. Unofficially, it came from Daniel's example. The CEO watched participation grow and thought, maybe change doesn't start with policy. Maybe it starts with imitation. Late one evening as the building emptied, Daniel was polishing the floors near the main entrance when the CEO stopped by again. "You work too much," the CEO said casually. Daniel chuckled. "And you think too much, sir?" The CEO laughed, a genuine one this time. Touch. They stood there in easy silence for a while. Two men from different worlds, finding comfort in simplicity. Finally the CEO said, "You ever think about doing more than this?" Daniel looked puzzled. "You mean leaving?" "No, I mean leading." Daniel smiled faintly. "I lead my daughter. That's enough." The CEO nodded slowly, understanding. "You know, that's more than most men can say." That line hit Daniel deeper than expected. Not because of the words, but because for the first time someone saw him beyond his uniform. From that night on, their interactions grew naturally, brief nods in passing, small check-ins. Neither tried to impress the other. Respect didn't need decoration. One day, Daniel found an envelope taped to his locker. Inside was a simple note. For those who clean up the mess the world leaves behind. Thank you. No signature, no logo, just gratitude. He didn't know it came from the CEO, but he didn't need to. It was enough to feel seen. Weeks passed. The air in the building felt lighter. Employees started greeting each other more often. Break room chatter softened. Even the cafeteria, once filled with mockery, had grown quieter, almost decent. One morning, Daniel walked by the same door where he'd first given food to the homeless boy. The spot was empty, but it didn't sting anymore. He whispered softly, "Wherever you are, kid, I hope you're eating." At that same hour, the CEO sat in his office reviewing a report about workplace morale improvements. The numbers looked good, but he knew what they really represented. One man's quiet influence rippling through an entire building. He smiled to himself, thinking, kindness scales better than strategy ever did. Neither man spoke of their connection, yet both carried it like a quiet secret, proof that empathy could bridge status, power, and pride. It wasn't a friendship built on words or favors. It was built on something stronger, mutual recognition of worth. And though neither realized it yet, this fragile trust would soon be tested in a way that would shake everything they'd begun to rebuild. The rumors started small. One careless comment in the break room, a whisper by the elevators. By the end of the week it had spread like spilled ink. "Did you hear? The janitor's kid got a full scholarship. CEO must really like sob stories. Guess kindness pays if you know who's watching." Daniel didn't notice it at first. He was too focused on work, too grateful that life had finally stopped pressing down on him. But the smiles that once seemed genuine now carried something sharper, pity mixed with whim. It all traced back to one person, his supervisor, Linda. She'd been with the company for 15 years, and hated being overlooked. Watching the CEO's sudden interest in a janitor made her blood boil. One night, she noticed an anonymous invoice payment for a local school come through under special community outreach. A few clicks later, she connected the dots, Daniel's daughter's school. The transaction was buried deep under private admin codes, but it was enough. She printed the records and sent a carefully worded email to HR, copying 2 senior managers. Possible misuse of corporate resources. Might want to check if certain employees are manipulating public sympathy for personal benefit. By morning, the narrative had twisted. Daniel, the humble janitor, was now being accused of playing the system, feeding a child for attention, milking pity for perks, and somehow convincing the CEO to fund his family through emotional manipulation. When HR called him in again, Daniel's chest tightened. The faces were colder this time. "Mr. Cruz," the officer began, "we have reports suggesting that recent financial aid connected to your family might have been inappropriately influenced by your behavior and visibility within the company." He blinked. "I don't understand." "The scholarship for your daughter," she continued, "it appears linked to internal accounts. There's concern that your prior incident and the resulting attention may have led to preferential treatment." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "I didn't ask for anything. I didn't even know where it came from." His supervisor folded her arms. "You can see how it looks, though. First a viral video, then special attention from upper management. It raises questions." "It raises none if you know me," he said quietly. But the HR officer's expression didn't change. "We'll need to place you on temporary suspension while we review the matter." The words felt unreal. Suspension? For what? For being decent? "Please don't make this harder, Mr. Cruz." He left the room with the same envelope that had once carried warnings. History repeating itself, cruelty dressed as policy. The same workers who'd once whispered admiration now looked at him with smirks that said, "We knew it." That night, Sophia found him sitting on the couch long after dinner, eyes blank. "Did something happen?" she asked softly. He didn't want to tell her, but she was old enough to sense truth hiding behind silence. "They think I did something wrong," he said finally. "They think I tricked someone into helping us." Her face crumpled. "But you didn't." "I know." "Then why are they punishing you?" He tried to smile. "Because sometimes, people see kindness as a weakness. They don't understand it." She started crying, the kind that comes from fear, not sadness. "You always get in trouble for being good. Mom did too. It's not fair." He pulled her close, but her words cut deep. She was right. Every time he chose compassion, the world slapped his hands for it. Maybe he was cursed to keep losing for the right reasons. After she fell asleep, he sat in the dark. His phone buzzed with an unknown number. Voicemail. He pressed play. Daniel, this is the CEO. I just heard about your suspension. Don't lose faith. I'll sort this out. He didn't reply. In that moment, it didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like betrayal. Because if the CEO truly cared, why had this happened at all? He stared at the photo on the wall, Maria holding baby Sophia years ago. He whispered to it, I tried, love. I tried to live the way you taught me. But maybe kindness doesn't survive here. The next morning he didn't go to work. He sat by the window watching rain streak down the glass. Each drop looked like proof that good deeds dissolved faster than dirt. Across the city, the CEO slammed a file shut on his desk. Who authorized this? He demanded. His assistant hesitated. It came through HR, sir. Linda pushed it. She said you'd want a fair review. Fair? He snapped. Fair would have been talking to me before dragging a man's name through the mud. He paced the room, fury mixing with guilt. He'd wanted to help quietly, but secrecy had made it look dirty. Now the one person who'd reminded him what integrity looked like was paying the price for his silence. For the first time in years, he felt powerless in his own company. That night, Daniel tore up his suspension letter but kept one piece, the header with his name and the word investigation. He folded it into his wallet next to Maria's photo, a cruel symmetry of loss and loyalty. Sophia came out of her room clutching a drawing. I made something for you. He looked down. It was a crayon sketch of him holding a mop like a sword, a tiny heart drawn on his chest. It means you're the hero, Daddy. He smiled, through tears. He didn't want her to see. Heroes don't always win, Bug. Then they're still heroes, she said quietly, and went back to bed. He sat there alone holding that drawing, whispering to the empty air. If being good keeps breaking me, why can't I stop? The question had no answer, only silence. And somewhere in that silence, a man in a corner office began preparing to make things right, no matter the cost. The file sat on the CEO's desk, thick with contradictions. The HR report, labeled Daniel Cruz, a potential liability. The social media thread called him a corporate saint. Neither description matched the man he had spoken to in that quiet hallway, the one who fixed leaks without asking, who gave without reason. He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he stood. Get me security, he said. Within an hour, the head of internal operations appeared, nervous. Sir, if this is about the custodial investigation. It is, the CEO interrupted. I want everything. All footage from the past 3 months. Cafeteria, back door, maintenance corridors, every timestamp where Daniel Cruz was on shift. The officer hesitated. That's quite a bit of data. I'm aware. I'll review it myself. When the door closed, the CEO loosened his tie and sat before the monitor. He hadn't done this kind of work in years, but something inside him refused to delegate it. This wasn't about policy, it was about conscience. Hours passed. He watched silent video after video. A man sweeping floors, fixing lights, picking up trash, others ignored. Then, frame by frame, small moments appeared. Daniel stopping to help an intern carry boxes up the stairs. Daniel returning a lost wallet to accounting before anyone noticed it was gone. Daniel covering a shift for a sick coworker without asking for overtime pay. Daniel quietly leaving food at the same back door more than once, long before any camera had caught him. The truth was undeniable. None of it was performance. It was pattern, consistency without audience. The CEO leaned back in his chair, hand over his face. He was never seeking attention, he whispered. He kept watching, until he reached the day of the infamous cafeteria scene. The angle showed the laughter, the mockery, the boy clutching the sandwich like salvation. The CEO paused on Daniel's face, the look of quiet shame that didn't deserve to exist. He hit stop and sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up the phone. Call HR, all of them, and get Linda from facilities. By the time they gathered in the boardroom, tension hung thick. The CEO placed a laptop in the center of the table and pressed play. For 5 minutes, no one spoke. The footage spoke for him. Each act of decency played back in raw, unedited truth. When the video ended, the CEO stood. That, he said evenly, is the man you called a manipulator. HR exchanged uneasy glances. Linda shifted in her seat. Sir, we were only following protocol. Protocol, he repeated, his voice cutting. The same protocol that punishes kindness and rewards performance. No one moved. I founded this company to build something better. He continued, voice low but steady. But somewhere along the way, we became experts at pretending to care. We turned empathy into marketing. And now, one person who reminded us what real decency looks like suffered for it. He looked directly at Linda. You initiated the report, didn't you? Her composure cracked. Sir, I was only doing what seemed appropriate. The financial link. You mean the anonymous scholarship fund I approved? He interrupted. You turned a child's education into an accusation. Linda's face drained of color. I didn't know. You didn't ask, he said sharply. You saw goodness and assumed manipulation. Because that's what our culture teaches here. Distrust the humble, reward the loud. He turned to HR. Suspend the investigation. Effective immediately. But sir, do it. Silence followed, heavy and final. When the others left, he stayed behind, staring at the empty room. Every success plaque on the wall suddenly felt like mockery. What good were profit margins if integrity had been lost along the way? He opened his laptop again and began typing an internal memo. Subject: accountability and change. We made a mistake, not just in how we treated one employee but in how we forgot the difference between values and slogans. Kindness is not a liability. Compassion is not a distraction. If decency threatens our image, then our image is the problem. He sent it company-wide. Then, almost without thinking, he called his assistant. Schedule an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning. Everyone, no exceptions. The next day, Daniel arrived at the building hesitantly. He'd planned to return his ID badge, clear out his locker quietly, and disappear. But the moment he walked in, people greeted him differently. Good morning, Mr. Cruz. Glad you're back. Sorry about everything. He blinked in confusion. The same cafeteria that had once humiliated him now looked awkwardly welcoming. Before he could process it, a security officer approached. Sir, the CEO would like to see you upstairs. Daniel followed, tense. When the elevator doors opened, the CEO was already waiting by the conference room. Mr. Cruz, he said warmly, thank you for coming. Daniel nodded slowly. Should I bring my badge? In case you need it back. The CEO smiled faintly. You won't be needing a replacement, just your voice. They stepped into the room. Every department head was seated. HR, communications, management. All eyes turned toward him.
The CEO began.
Yesterday, we realized something important. We punished a man for being exactly what we claim to value. We talk about community, integrity, responsibility, but when someone actually lived those principles, we treated him like a threat. He gestured toward Daniel. This man didn't seek attention. He didn't stage compassion. He simply acted. And we turned his kindness into controversy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some looked down, ashamed. Daniel stood still, unsure if he should speak. The CEO continued, voice thickening with emotion. The fault isn't his, it's mine, because culture starts from the top, and I let decay into fear of sincerity. He turned to Daniel directly. You reminded me that leadership isn't measured in stock prices, it's measured in humanity, and for that I owe you more than an apology. The room fell silent. Daniel swallowed hard. Sir, I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't, the CEO said gently. You caused reflection. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then unexpectedly, applause began, soft at first, then growing. Daniel didn't know where to look. He felt exposed, but not in the way humiliation felt. This was something else. Recognition. After the meeting, the CEO walked with him to the elevator. I can't undo what they did, he said quietly, but I can make sure it never happens again. Daniel hesitated. You don't owe me anything, sir. Maybe not, the CEO replied, but I owe it to everyone who works here. You showed me how far we've drifted. He handed Daniel a folded sheet of paper. This isn't a contract or a promotion. Just something small. Daniel opened it later in the elevator. It was a handwritten note. For those who remind us what we've forgotten, thank you for teaching us how to be human again. He stood there for a long time, staring at the words, heart heavy with something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. That evening, as he left the building, he passed the same back door where the homeless boy used to wait. This time, there was someone new, a young man in a delivery uniform, sitting on the curb, looking defeated. Daniel walked over, handed him his leftover sandwich, and smiled. Here, it's not much, but it's warm. The young man blinked. You're the guy from that video, aren't you? Daniel shrugged. Just someone who doesn't like seeing people hungry. Across town, the CEO watched the building's security feed one last time before shutting it off. This time, there was no guilt in watching, only gratitude. He knew what he needed to do next. Take this lesson beyond apology, beyond damage control. Tomorrow, he would announce a new program, one that didn't come from PR but from conviction. The Cruise Initiative, a company-funded community outreach effort named not for branding but for truth. As he turned off the lights, he thought of Daniel's words in that hallway. It helps me remember who I am. For the first time in years, the CEO felt the same. He whispered to the empty office, "You reminded me too. Everyone, please take your seats." The voice echoed across the cafeteria, the same cafeteria where laughter once burned through Daniel like acid. Now rows of chairs filled the space. Banners hung from the walls with the company logo beside new words: integrity, integrity, rediscovering what matters. Daniel stood at the far end of the room, near the exit. Uncomfortable in the borrowed blazer the HR manager insisted he wear. He hadn't wanted to come. The CEO had said it was important. But crowds made him uneasy. Too many eyes, too many memories of mockery. On stage, the CEO adjusted the microphone. He wasn't dressed like usual either. No suit jacket, no polished presentation voice. Just sleeves rolled up, speaking plain. "I know most of you didn't expect this meeting to be about one man," he began, glancing toward Daniel. "But sometimes it takes one person's quiet action to expose who we really are, and who we've stopped being." The audience murmured. Daniel kept his eyes low. "You've all heard the rumors," the CEO continued. "You've seen the clip, the posts, the debates. Some called it virtue signaling, some called it unprofessional. But when I eyed it again and again, I saw something we've lost." He paused. Human decency without an audience. A large screen behind him lit up. The video played. The 1-minute footage of Daniel sharing his lunch with the homeless boy. This time, there was no laughter. The silence that filled the room was reverent. Every gesture, every second of that simple act carried weight now. The same cafeteria that had once turned it into a joke now sat frozen, realizing what they'd mocked. When the clip ended, the CEO let the silence breathe. Then he said, "That's Daniel Cruise. He's worked here 6 years. No complaints, no fanfare, no spotlight, just quiet consistency. He didn't break company rules. He exposed our lack of compassion." He motioned toward the side of the stage. "Daniel, would you come up here, please?" Daniel froze. For a moment he thought he'd misheard. The HR manager nodded toward the stage. "He's calling you," she whispered. His hands shook slightly as he walked down the aisle. The sound of his footsteps on the polished floor felt louder than the applause starting to rise. When he reached the stage, the CEO extended a hand. Daniel hesitated, then took it. "Mr. Cruise," the CEO said, voice steady but warm. "You reminded me what leadership should look like. Not authority, not hierarchy, but empathy in motion." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but words failed. The CEO smiled gently. "That's okay. You've already said everything worth saying through your actions." He turned back to the crowd. "Today I'm reinstating Daniel Cruise to his full position with back pay. But that's not enough. Starting today, he'll serve as lead coordinator for our new outreach program, the Cruise Initiative, helping us connect with shelters, schools and food drives across the city." The audience erupted in applause. Some stood. Others wiped tears. Daniel blinked, overwhelmed. "Sir, I'm just a janitor." The CEO shook his head. "You're the standard." That line echoed through the room. Cameras recorded. Phones went up. But this time, no one was mocking. They were documenting something rare, humility being honored. The CEO gestured to the screen again. This company built its image on slogans like "People First." Daniel lived it alone, quietly, and we failed him for it. So this moment isn't charity, it's correction. He turned back to Daniel. "If you'll allow it, I'd like you to share a few words." Daniel's throat tightened. The microphone felt heavier than any mop he'd ever held. He looked out at the faces, the same ones that once looked down on him, now waiting. For once they weren't laughing. "I don't know what to say," he began softly. "I didn't plan to be on a stage. I just saw someone hungry." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't give him food because I wanted to be seen. I gave it because I've been there. I know what it's like to wait for kindness that never comes." The crowd stayed silent, every ear leaning in. "When people mocked me, I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It hurt. Still, I kept going because my daughter needed to see that doing right isn't about reward. It's about remembering who you are, even when no one else does." He glanced at the CEO. "I don't know why you're thanking me, but if this means something changes for the people who clean, fix, and hold this place together, then I'll..." Applause thundered through the cafeteria. The CEO stepped forward again, eyes glistening. "It will change, Daniel. Starting now." He motioned to the HR team at the side of the room. They unveiled a new plaque mounted near the entrance, engraved with the words, "Kindness is not a policy, it's a choice." Dedicated to Daniel Cruz. The applause rose again, louder this time. Employees stood, some clapping through tears. The sound filled the same room that had once humiliated him. For Daniel, it wasn't pride that filled his chest. It was release, years of being invisible suddenly undone by truth. He wasn't a symbol or a saint. He was a man who finally didn't have to apologize for caring. At the edge of the stage, Sophia ran forward. The CEO had quietly arranged for her to attend. She jumped into her father's arms, hugging him tight. The crowd cheered even louder. "I told you," she whispered in his ear, voice trembling. "You're still the hero." He laughed softly, pressing his forehead to hers. "Maybe this time, the world finally believes you." The CEO watched the scene, feeling something loosen inside him, guilt giving way to gratitude. He turned back to the employees. "Let this be the last time we confuse kindness with weakness. The world doesn't need more rules, it needs more Daniels." The crowd clapped again, chanting his name now, "Daniel, Daniel." Daniel shook his head, embarrassed but smiling. "Please," he said quietly. "It's just Danny." The room laughed, but it wasn't cruel this time. It was warm, shared, human. As the event ended, people came to shake his hand. The same coworkers who once mocked him. One by one they said thank you. Some apologized. He accepted every word with quiet grace. When the crowd began to thin, the CEO approached him once more. "You know," he said with a soft smile, "you taught me something no book or boardroom ever could." Daniel tilted his head. "What's that?" "That leadership doesn't start with power. It starts with conscience." Daniel looked down, humbled. "And conscience doesn't start with wealth," he replied. "It starts with hunger, the kind that makes you care." They shared a quiet moment of understanding, two men who had lived in different worlds finally standing on the same ground. As people filed out, the janitor looked once more at the plaque, then at the doorway where his life had changed months ago. He didn't feel anger anymore, only calm. The CEO turned to him. "There's a press conference tomorrow, they'll want quotes." Daniel chuckled. "Tell them I'm busy cleaning up after history." The CEO laughed genuinely this time. "You always have the last word, don't you?" Daniel smiled. "Not always, just when it matters." The lights dimmed, applause fading into memory. The same cafeteria that once witnessed cruelty had become a stage for redemption. And as Daniel walked out holding his daughter's hand, he glanced at the glass door where the homeless boy used to wait, and whispered, "You started all this, kid." For once the world had caught up to kindness, and learned to stand in its light. "Coffee's stronger up here," Daniel said, staring into the small porcelain cup on the CEO's desk. "Still tastes too fancy for me." The CEO laughed softly. "That's because you're used to the break room brew." "Yeah," Daniel grinned. "The kind that's 80% courage, 20% caffeine." It had been 3 months since the town hall. The company had changed in ways that people could actually feel. Not slogans, atmosphere. The posters about values were replaced by real programs. Lunch breaks became longer. Volunteer days became routine. And most surprising of all, the distance between ranks began to shrink. Employees who once walked past janitors without eye contact now stopped to talk. Daniel still wore his uniform, but people greeted him by name now. Not "Hey, maintenance," but "Morning, Danny." He'd insisted on keeping the job. "The floors still need cleaning," he told HR when they offered him a promotion. "Just because people noticed me doesn't mean the work changed." The CEO respected that, but he also kept his word. The Cruz Initiative launched officially that month. The company now donated part of its quarterly profits to local shelters, youth programs, and education drives. Daniel oversaw the outreach team part-time, training volunteers on how to serve with dignity. His mantra was simple: never treat help like a favor. The CEO often joined him at these events without bodyguards, without photographers. Just two men standing side by side, doing something that didn't need to be seen to matter. Their friendship had formed quietly, built not on power but shared regret. Over coffee they talked about their pasts, about Maria, about the CEO's father, about the spaces between success and meaning. "You know," the CEO said one morning, "my father used to take me to his workshop. He'd give his lunch to a stray dog that waited outside every day. I'd get mad because it meant he ate less. He'd just smile and say, 'You don't lose by giving.'" Daniel nodded. "Maria used to say the same thing. Back then I didn't get it either. What changed? I lost her, Daniel replied softly. And when you lose enough, giving starts to feel like the only way to stay human. The CEO leaned back, letting that truth settle. Then maybe we both needed reminders, he said quietly. Their bond grew through shared purpose. Daniel's calm honesty balanced the CEO's restless drive. When meetings became too corporate, too rehearsed, the CEO would call Daniel up to speak. One afternoon, Daniel stood before a group of interns during a mentorship session. You'll spend years trying to climb ladders, he told them. But don't forget to notice who's holding the ladder steady. Titles don't keep companies standing, people do. The interns clapped, genuinely inspired. The CEO, watching from the back, smiled. He realized Daniel had become more than a symbol. He'd become the company's conscience. One Friday, something unexpected happened. A security guard approached Daniel in the lobby. Sir, there's a kid asking for you outside. Says he knows you. Daniel frowned, stepping into the sunlight. There by the gate stood the homeless boy, older, thinner, but unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same nervous posture. Hey, Daniel said softly. Didn't think I'd see you again. The boy shrugged. Didn't think you'd want to.
Why wouldn't I?
The boy looked down. Heard you got in trouble 'cause of me. Daniel chuckled sadly. Let's just say trouble turned into something better. The boy's shoulders relaxed. I didn't mean for that to happen. I just wanted to eat. Daniel crouched to his level. You don't owe me an apology. You reminded me what I'd forgotten too. That good doesn't always wait for permission. He guided the boy inside. The receptionist looked startled. It's okay, Daniel said. He's with me. They went up to the CEO's office. The boy's name was Evan, 15 years old. No parents, no home, no plan. The CEO listened quietly as Daniel explained. So this is the kid, the CEO said, offering a gentle smile. The one who started everything. Evan nodded shyly. Sorry if I messed things up. You didn't mess up anything, the CEO replied. You reminded us what matters. That day they enrolled Evan into one of the shelters funded by the Cruise Initiative. Within weeks he was attending school again. He started volunteering at the company's weekend outreach events, telling others, I used to be the kid they helped. Seeing him thrive felt like full circle. For Daniel it was as if Maria's kindness had found another way to live on. Meanwhile, Sophia had changed too. She no longer whispered about her father's job when friends asked. She said it proudly. My dad runs kindness projects for his company, she'd say, showing pictures of the cafeteria plaque. One evening she sat with Daniel in the park after school. Daddy, when people talk about heroes, they think of people in capes, she said. But I think heroes are just people who don't stop being good, even when it's hard. Daniel smiled. Then I guess you're one too. She laughed. Unlearning from the best. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something inside him fully heal. Not because the pain vanished, but because it finally had meaning. Months later, during a board meeting, the CEO presented a new annual report. But instead of charts, the slides showed photos. Volunteers painting shelters, employees serving food, kids like Evan smiling. This, he said, is our profit. No one argued. After the meeting, he found Daniel waiting outside. You still make the numbers look small, the CEO joked. Daniel smirked. That's because the heart doesn't fit on spreadsheets. The CEO laughed. Don't tell finance that. As they walked toward the lobby, Daniel asked, do you ever miss how things were before? The quiet, the certainty. The CEO thought for a moment. Sometimes, but comfort made me blind. I prefer this uncertain but awake. Daniel nodded. Awake's a good word. They stepped out onto the same sidewalk where the homeless boy once stood. The evening air felt lighter now. The company logo glowed above them. No longer a symbol of power but of purpose. Funny, the CEO said, how it all started with a sandwich. Kindness always starts small, Daniel replied. That's why people underestimate it. Later that week, during one of the Cruise Initiative's community days, Daniel and the CEO worked side by side distributing meals. The employees who joined no longer saw it as volunteering. It felt like belonging. A woman approached Daniel, holding her child's hand. You don't remember me, she said, but I used to clean here before you. I quit years ago because no one ever looked at us. I came back today just to say thank you for making them see. Daniel smiled, shaking her hand. Then we both did something right. The CEO watched quietly from a distance. It amazed him how leadership had shifted without announcement, how a janitor's steadiness had reset the moral compass of an entire corporation. He'd been in business long enough to know success rarely looked like this. Yet this, the sight of Daniel surrounded by people he'd healed without speeches, felt more meaningful than any award on his shelf. That night, the CEO called Daniel into his office again. "You know," he said, "you've become something I can't quite define." Daniel chuckled. "That sounds dangerous." "No, necessary." The CEO leaned forward. "Would you ever consider a new title? Something that lets you teach others what you've taught me?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Titles make people nervous. But if it helps me serve better, sure." The CEO grinned. "Chief Humanity Advisor." Daniel burst out laughing. "Now you're just making stuff up." "I'm serious," the CEO said. "You've done more to restore humanity here than any executive we've ever hired." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not a leader." "Exactly," the CEO replied. "That's why you are one." They sat in shared laughter until the night grew quiet again. A few weeks later, a small ceremony was held at the company's new outreach center, a converted warehouse near the city's edge. The sign outside read, "The Cruise Center, for dignity, not charity." Inside, employees and volunteers gathered as Daniel and Sophia cut the ribbon together. Evan stood beside them, grinning proudly in his new volunteer shirt. "Feels strange seeing my name on a building," Daniel whispered. "It belongs there," the CEO said beside him. "It's not about ownership, it's about origin." Daniel nodded, his eyes glistening. "Maria would have loved this." "She'd be proud of you," the CEO said gently. Daniel smiled through tears. "I think she already is." The crowd cheered as the doors opened. Inside were classrooms, a food pantry, and a small art room dedicated to Sophia's drawings. On one wall hung the framed words, "You don't lose by giving," a lesson passed forward by those who learned the hard way. That night, after everyone left, Daniel stood alone in the empty hall. He touched the wall, whispered, "We did it, love," and felt the air itself seem to answer. Outside, the CEO waited by the car. "Ready to go?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, but I'll walk home tonight. Feels right." The CEO smiled knowingly. "See you tomorrow, partner." "Partner," Daniel repeated, tasting the word like something new and clean. He walked home under streetlights that no longer felt lonely. His daughter waited up for him, sketchbook open. She was drawing a scene, two men shaking hands, one in a suit, one in overalls. "What's that?" he asked. "It's called Same Heart, Different Clothes," she said proudly. He smiled, eyes stinging. "That's beautiful." She looked up at him. "Do you think kindness really changes the world, Daddy?" He knelt beside her. "Not all at once," he said, "but one person at a time. That's how everything starts." She nodded thoughtfully, adding a small heart above the two men in her drawing. When Daniel turned off the lights that night, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of the people who had crossed paths because of one small act of compassion. In another part of the city, the CEO stared out his office window, the skyline shimmering below. On his desk sat a small note card Daniel had written and left behind during a visit earlier that week. "We don't change the world by being seen, we change it by seeing others." He smiled, setting the card down gently. The world outside didn't know that the company's biggest turnaround wasn't financial. It was spiritual. Numbers would rise and fall, but something deeper had been fixed. And somewhere between two men, one who led with power, one who led with heart, a new kind of leadership had begun. Kindness had survived the storm. And this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was the foundation. "Leave the sign up," Daniel said, "even if it makes people uncomfortable." The cafeteria manager smiled. "You really think anyone will complain about free food for anyone?" "They will," Daniel replied gently, wiping his hands on his apron. "Not everyone's ready to share what they think they earned. That's why the table matters." Months had passed since the public reversal, and the cafeteria, once a place of mockery, had become the heart of something new. The shared table policy was Daniel's idea, backed fully by the CEO, a long wooden table near the center of the room with a simple plaque that read, "If you're hungry, you belong here." There was no registration, no questions, no surveillance. Employees could donate meals anonymously, or simply sit and share. Anyone, staff, visitors, even passers-by from nearby shelters could eat freely. What began as a corporate experiment had become a quiet revolution. Daniel oversaw it every morning, ensuring dignity stayed intact. He reminded staff, "We're not feeding people, we're eating with people." The change rippled outward. Cafeteria workers began greeting regulars from outside the company, interns volunteered during lunch breaks, and somewhere between soup refills and shared laughter, Barriers began to dissolve. Daniel would stand at the edge, hands folded, just watching. He didn't speak much now. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried memory, a reminder of what cruelty had once lived here, and at quickly kindness had taken its place. Sometimes he'd spot the same homeless boy, Evan, now in clean clothes and interning part-time through the cruise initiative. Evan would grin every time he saw him. "You're still feeding people, huh?" Daniel would smile back. "Nah, just making sure no one eats alone." The CEO still visited occasionally, though not for speeches anymore. He'd grab a tray, sit beside anyone who had an empty chair, and listen. He'd stopped being sir to most of them. Now he was just Michael. He liked it that way. One afternoon, he found Daniel seated at the shared table, laughing with two cafeteria workers. Michael joined quietly, setting down his coffee. "Every time I come here," he said, "you're surrounded by people. Don't you ever take a break?" Daniel grinned. "You used to tell me the same thing, remember?" Michael chuckled. "Touche." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the room hum with warmth. People of every level, from interns to executives, sat shoulder to shoulder. The table had erased status in a way policy never could. Michael leaned forward. "You know what amazes me most?" "What's that?" "How fast people adjusted to kindness, once they stopped being afraid of it." Daniel nodded. Kindness was never the problem. Fear was. People feared being judged for caring. Once you gave them permission, they remembered how. Michael smiled. "You sound more like a philosopher than a janitor." "I just sweep floors," Daniel said softly. "The dirt looks different now, but it's still the same work." Across the next months, stories from the cafeteria began spreading beyond the company. Local news covered it once, calling it the table that changed a city. Other businesses reached out for guidance, asking how to implement similar programs. Daniel refused media interviews. "It's not about fame," he told Michael. "It's about continuity. The moment we make it a campaign, it dies." Instead, he kept mentoring quietly. New hires often sought him out, especially those struggling with burnout or cynicism. He'd listen, smile, and tell them simple things. Kindness isn't a skill, it's a choice. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Lead how you'd want your child to remember you. He never realized how many notebooks filled up with his words. One young manager once confessed, "I used to be afraid of being soft. Now I'm afraid of losing that softness." Daniel smiled. "That means you're healing." The company culture, once rigid and transactional, had become a living example of transformation. Quarterly reports still mattered, but now the CEO ended every meeting with the same line: "Don't forget what the numbers can't measure." Sophia, now a little older, often visited the shared table after school. She'd sit with her father, sketchbook open, capturing small moments, hands passing bread, strangers laughing, a janitor talking with a director. Her drawings decorated the cafeteria walls, unframed, unsigned. One day, she showed her father a new one, a simple scene of a hand reaching across a table. Above it she'd written, "The world changes one meal at a time." Daniel's eyes misted. "You think people believe that?" She shrugged. "They will when they sit down." That evening, after she went home, he stayed behind, wiping down tables long after everyone left. He paused at the plaque. "If you're hungry, you belong here." His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished brass. He whispered, "We belong here too, Maria." One afternoon, Michael stopped by unannounced. "Walk with me," he said. They strolled through the halls together. Two men from different worlds, yet equals now. The walls displayed photos of outreach events, scholarship recipients, community meals. The company had started calling it the cruise effect. "I've been thinking," Michael said. "You ever notice how this all started with loss?" Daniel looked at him. "What do you mean?" "You fed that boy because you'd lost your wife. I changed because I'd lost my direction. The world seems to need pain before it learns empathy." Daniel nodded. "Pain clears the noise. It reminds you what matters." Michael stopped at the window, overlooking the city. "You've rebuilt this place, Daniel. Not through policy, through presence." Daniel smiled. "And you let it happen. That's leadership." They stood there a moment, quietly proud of something larger than themselves. Michael sighed. "You ever wonder how long this will last?" "As long as someone keeps caring," Daniel said simply. Months later, at the annual company gathering, the CEO addressed the crowd in a smaller tone than usual. 2 years ago, this company was successful, but hollow. We mistook profit for purpose. One act changed that. Not a campaign, not a strategy, just one skipped lunch that became a movement. He gestured to Daniel, seated near the front. This man taught me that dignity doesn't scale, it spreads, and if we keep feeding it, it'll feed us back. Daniel bowed his head modestly as the audience applauded, but the applause wasn't about him, it was about what he represented, proof that humanity could survive in a place built for ambition. After the event, a new hire approached Daniel shyly. "Sir, I joined because of you," she said. "My dad worked in cleaning too. I used to think people like us couldn't change anything, but you did." Daniel smiled gently. "Then it wasn't for nothing." He shook her hand, and for a second he saw Maria in her proud, steadfast, quietly strong. That evening, as the building emptied, Daniel lingered once more in the cafeteria. He looked around at the empty chairs, the faint scent of coffee, the echo of laughter. He sat at the shared table, alone but not lonely. In his pocket was a folded napkin, Sophia's doodle of two hands reaching across a table. He laid it flat, smoothing the wrinkles, smiling to himself. Michael appeared at the doorway. "You still working late?" "Just keeping it clean," Daniel said. "Good things deserve care." Michael stepped inside, hands in his pockets. "You ever wonder if the world's really changing, or if we're just trying to believe it is?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Does it matter? The change we can see is enough to start with." Michael nodded, pulling out a chair. "Mind if I sit?" Daniel smiled. "You never have to ask." They sat together quietly, sharing leftover coffee in silence, the kind that feels sacred. The clock ticked softly above them. Time had moved forward, but something eternal lingered, a rhythm built on redemption, humility and choice. Michael finally stood. "You know," he said with a faint smile, "I think your wife would have liked this table." Daniel's eyes softened. "She'd have scolded me for not eating enough, that's for sure." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that heals. As Michael walked toward the exit, Daniel called out, "Hey boss." Michael turned. "Thanks for seeing me." Michael smiled. "No, Daniel, thank you for reminding me to look." He left, and the cafeteria lights dimmed to a warm glow. Daniel stayed a while longer, cleaning one last table. Outside, night fell soft over the city, streetlights reflecting off glass towers. Silent witnesses, is a story that had begun with one man giving away his lunch. He sat down again, folded his hands, and let the peace settle. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves, they just quietly change the temperature of a room, until even indifference feels uncomfortable, and empathy feels inevitable. That was the human legacy. A janitor had reminded a company that kindness wasn't weakness. A CEO had remembered that leadership wasn't control. And a child once hungry, once invisible, now helped feed others. All from one sandwich. One moment. One man who refused to stop caring. Final narration, CTA voiceover tone. Have you ever seen kindness punished before it was understood? Tell us where you're watching from, and one word that describes how this story made you feel.